Good evening, and on the FirstCry Intelli platform, I am Rashmi Narsuri. Um, First of all, before we start off with anything else, I really apologize to you hugely because of this technical hitch that came up in between. We should have started the session quite ahead, but we couldn't. So I really apologize for that. And I am very passionate about writing and telling stories, which is why people call me an author. And I also like to help people write and create their own stories, which is why people think and say that I am a creative writing mentor. And then, of course, I also poke my nose into everybody else's conversations, trying to make their conversations more effective and making them sound better. So they say I am a communication skills coach. And I started off writing poems, but somewhere down the line, I switched over to stories. And after a couple of books later, His Share of Sky happened. This is the book, His Share of Sky, which got me the Sahitya Academy Award for Children's Literature in 2012. And since then, of course, I have been writing stories, telling stories to children, interacting with them, learning with them, and teaching them. So, in the process, I have forgotten to come out of my childhood. Anyway, I'm enjoying this extension. So, today, we're here to talk about how stories impact a child's development in the early years. So, when we talk about stories, we have two sets of stories. One is the verbal story, and the other is the non-verbal story. So you might be wondering, a story is always about telling, but how is there a non-verbal story? It is the story which comes through eye contact, through body language, through facial expression, and all of the assorted package. But first of all, we will come to verbal narration. And when it comes to verbal narration, never mind the structured and fine literary piece which we have for stories, which we will have with a subject, a protagonist, a topic, a setting, a backdrop, a plot. There will be drama, there will be suspense, everything in it. Never mind all of that. For a child, because today we're talking of our main concern is small children and maybe children to about 10 years of age. So for them, simple narrations, very simple. Like, for instance, these are pandemic days, so we are all mostly indoors. So a child looks out of the window and says, "Hey, Mama, look, there's a bird flying out of the window there." So that also is a tale. That is a story. Encourage the child to tell more of it, and the child will learn to tell more of it when you also tell and talk with her. These days, actually, a lot of parents come with the issue of speech for their children. They say that the child is, 1.5 years or 2 years, and then he or she refuses to talk. Probably the problem here is not that the child does not and cannot talk, because I have come across parents who have taken their kids to therapists and doctors and they found out everything was all right. It was just that the child wasn't talking. Why? Encourage the child to talk in such a way that put such questions to the child where the child need not just nod or shake its head. Make it come up with its own things. For instance, you should put descriptive questions which call for descriptive answers. Maybe say, how was the doll? Can you tell me how the doll's dress was? So the child will go on to say the child's dress was. In this particular case, the child cannot just nod or shake its head. It will have to describe the doll's dress. So that is how you encourage speech in a child. And it shouldn't take much time. The child will definitely talk. It will talk so much that you will have to say, oh my God, let us sit for a while now without talking. Right. So that is about verbal storytelling. The only thing here is it has to appeal to all the five senses. The eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the skin. It has to appeal to all the senses because later on this appeal will go on to develop the child's subconscious, which is the most essential part of a child's development, the subconscious. Because whatever the child is learning in its growing up years, it gets imbibed in its subconscious, knowingly or unknowingly. And it is these which will shape and mold the child in later life. So we have to see that the stories that we tell the child or we encourage the child to make up on its own appeal to all the senses and that it holds the child's attention. And then, of course, we come to nonverbal stories. Nonverbal stories is, of course, body language, eye movements. Now, for instance, the child knows hands, and the child does not differentiate between the words raise and clap. So when you show body language, when you raise your hand, the child knows that the hands, it involves the hands, but you have to raise them. And then when you show motion, you say clap your hands, then the child knows that it is about the hands again, but they are two different things. Raising and clapping are two different things. This is how you will have to innovate in the process. And it's amazing, how you, in the course of learning with your child, teaching your child and learning with your child, it is amazing how you come to see that you have yourself innovated such amazing techniques to teach the child. Because your child is special. Every child is special. And no two children come with the same characteristics. It is like dress and shoes that no common size, no one size fits two kids. So we have to custom make our stories. We have to custom make our body language, our movements, our eye contacts for the development of the child because it is you who knows your child the best. So you will have to take help, and how we help, that we will come to, because after all we are all stakeholders in this, and we all want our children to grow, especially in the earliest years of its life. Then on, when does a story start to impact a child's mind? First of all, stage one, the development, the impact of a story on its development starts right when the child is in the mother's womb. That's one thing, because we all know about Prahlad and we all know about Ashtavakra. So these are tales we will not go to now, maybe some other time, some other place. But these are tales that tell us how stories and behavior of the mother have developed the baby in the womb itself. That was stage one. Stage two. Have you ever tried rubbing a child's cheek or maybe its back when it is sleeping or any part else? You just see the bliss coming over on the child's face. That is the story of touch. It is a story of assurance. It is a story of belonging. It is the story of love. And that has already started the sense of touch in the child, and the sense of touch which has developed in the child will also develop in its subconscious a secure feeling. The child is definitely going to be emotionally healthy and strong. And then, of course, we come to stage three when the child has started to look around and hear food sounds and noises, familiar ones. So when it sees a familiar face, you see how it turns around and looks at the face. Maybe it's mommy's, it's daddy's, or someone who really takes care of the child very lovingly. So you see how the child turns around to look for that face. And then, even if the child does not see a familiar face, but somewhere from the corner of the room, the child hears a familiar voice. Watch how the child, even from its lying position, turns its head towards the voice because it can hear. It knows that that voice is someone he looks forward to. So these are all part of the non-verbal story. And non-verbal stories play the biggest role in developing the five senses, which again play the biggest role in developing the conscious, the subconscious. And then we come to stage 4, where the child has started to speak a few words and doodle and scribble and draw and color. So now this is the time we need to encourage the child to express itself through props, through sketches, through drawings, through songs, through narrations, simple narrations. Maybe we could encourage the child to say that for bigger children, for older children, they are having online classes these days. So we can say, hey, how was your online class today? And the child could maybe say, supposing this is just an example, that, hey, you know, mommy, when my friend was attending the class, his pet came and popped up on his lap and tumbled the laptop. And, so you encourage them. So is it, what was the pet? Was it a dog or a cat? So here the child cannot just nod or shake its head. The child has to say dog or cat. This is how you bring out speech and language in a child. And then this also signifies recollection and memory, because the child will have to think what happened during his online class. What happened besides the online class on the sidelines, because whatever was going on in class, he definitely tried to keep it to him, and whatever was happening on the sidelines, that also is trying to recollect and narrate to you. So this is, again, we're trying to imbibe in him verbal narrations. So what we now do is, we are all a part of the child's growing up and development. We have to we have to give our inputs, which the child will process, and then we have the development and the impact showing. The impact comes a little later. What we should do first is we should put in our stuff. We put in our efforts, our endeavors. Sorry. So when I say that what endeavors we do give as an input, I put the mnemonic fat B, which is easier to remember, Just a minute, I think there are messages coming up, so let me just check up. Okay, so yes, fat B, I was just telling you, mnemonic. Bumblebee, fat B. So F here is for facial expression. This is what I just told you. Fat B. Now, supposing you are that 2-year-old child and fat is a new word for you. How do you know fat? Fat could be anything. So when I say fat B, so you know fat means round and roly-poly. So fat B, F is for facial expression. A is for adding new words, simple words. We keep it simple, and that, of course, will depend on the age group of the child. If the child is very small, we will put very small words, like just now we said fat. So fat is okay for a small child, but for a slightly older child, maybe we could use a slightly bigger words, and then we will play along with it in a different way. We will try so that the child uses the word again and again repeatedly, and we will not move on for the younger child to go on. We will not go on to a new word till the child learns the proper use of this word and the child is comfortable using it. So that is A. And then we come to T. T is for tone of speech. Now supposing you tell your child with a very grumpy face, I love you. The child will think it is scolding. You are scolding him. So bring on that tone of speech. I love you. So give it a hug. So the child knows that that means it is something endearing that mommy or daddy is telling the child. So the content of the sentence remains the same, but your tone of speech makes it vastly different. And coming to this, I would also like to say, if you're screaming and shouting too much at your child, most of the time, then what happens is when it actually is time for some real screaming, then the child just feels that, oh, mommy is always screaming. So he or she will not heed to your screaming. Supposing these are emergency situations, your child is playing, and then there is a car coming up across the road. So your child didn't see it. So this is the moment you will actually scream, hey, come back, there's a car coming. But if you have always been screaming at the child will think that, oh, mommy is always screaming, so let her just be, and she will go on. Disaster. So keep your tone down and soft and low. So when it comes to the actual requirement, the actual moment when your shout and screaming is required, give all of your it to the scream. So that's about T. Then we come to body language, fat B. The B of BWB is for body language. And body language we have already discussed. It is about, how you express, how you talk with your body. Now, for instance, in the storytelling, there was a big bear in the jungle. So big bear. Maybe you could tell, how big was the bear? The bear was this big. I haven't seen that big a bear right in front of me, but never mind. So you use your hands, you use your eyes, you use your facial expression, everything to describe the bear. And then it was a cold night in the jungle. How cold was the night? You brace yourself together, you shiver and hold together. It was a very cold night. Ooh. So these are body languages that come up with your tone, with your verbal storytelling. And then the bear smelled honey, sweet honey. How sweet was the honey? Ah, the honey was sweet. And in the process, you know what happened? There was a small breathe in and breathe out yoga as well. So maybe this you can change according to whatever food your child loves. So instead of honey, maybe you can change whatever food the child likes. And we could make this more often. So you let the child breathe in and breathe out. So in a playway system, the child is also taking in a breathing exercise. So that is B of the B. And yes, so we were just thinking if we could have the child having imaginary friends, and why not? Why definitely, yes, we can. In fact, I was coming to it, because these are the impacts of storytelling. The child develops its imagination, and imagination, it was later in the talk, but because this thing has come up, let me just tell you, yes, just observe and watch how the child plays house. The child will take a dupatta, mummy's dupatta, and wrap it around herself like a sari, and she will pretend to be mommy, or sometimes she may pretend to be daddy as well. Or sometimes she may pretend to be the teacher, and she will have imaginary students and she will talk to them. Have you observed This is such a wonderful experience. I thoroughly enjoy myself doing that. Little children, they play house and there are make-believe enactments, and sometimes they pretend to be doctors, and sometimes whatever comes over their fancy, and they also pretend to be singers and martial arts students, and it's amazing. So this is how you see that they must have surely seen something of this somewhere, and it has come to their mind, sat in their subconscious, and now they are replaying it. This is their imagination. And if you observe the child very well, you will also notice that in the course the child exhibits what it wants to be, maybe later on in life. Because if it shows too much of an inclination towards pretending to be a teacher, you might get a hint that the child wants to become a teacher when it grows up. So, um, yeah. So we were coming to E of the B, the first E, which is eye contact. Whenever you're talking to a child, please make sure that you're looking at the child's eye. Of course, when you're showing some fingers and something else, then of course that's a different issue. But when you're talking, please make sure that you're talking into the child's eyes and encourage as well the child to look into your eyes. So you get to know the child better and the child gets to know you better. So that is the first B. And then the second E of the B, the fat B, is entertainment. I tell you, there can be no learning and no teaching if there is no entertainment involved. If you think it is a very taxing process, then the impact, the wonderful development is not going to manifest itself. And the first few days, the first few months maybe would be a bit of, because you are trying to fall into the process of being a first mom or a new mom, a young mom. So it will take some time, but later on you will realize, you wouldn't know when, but you will realize that you have actually started liking this process of learning and teaching with your child and making it talk, making it express itself, making its creativity come alive. And in the process, you don't know what an investment it is. You're developing all of the senses in the child, and you are in the process, the senses are also in turn developing the child's subconscious. So now we come to, yes, now we come to the impact part. Learning. In smaller children, actually, learning can be through stories, the learning of, say, colors, of shapes, of fruits, of birds. You show pictures. This will be learning. And yes, there can also be learning of brushing your teeth, combing your hair, and we make it all into a story. Um, you know, like I told you earlier, simple narrations. Everything is a story. From the first cry, I'm using your term, from the first cry to the first word to the first sentence, make every conversation into a beautiful story. Whatever you're telling the child, make it come alive. Put everything of yours into it. You will realize later on, when the child has actually started to go to school and learn heavier stuff than just colors and shapes, you will realize that what a beautiful foundation the child has had from you because of this learning process that you have imbibed in the child. And actually, stories keep up with the inertia of learning. That's what I was coming to. Because at one time of life, at one stage, we all know that children learn very fast. But as you grow older, the learning process takes a setback. And maybe older, very old people, they do not wish to learn anymore because the inertia has stopped. So stories keep the inertia on. And for the child, the learning process is always on, in which case. So now actually they're also starting to teach heritage and history and geography via storytelling. It's such an amazing thing. I have said for a few sessions and it was wonderful. So let's start right at the beginning. 1 year, 2 years, or earlier, whenever. So that is for smaller children. And for older children, actually, it comes to about culture, about the child's culture, the child's history. And these days being global, the times of global villages, wherever the child was born or wherever his roots are, he may not have he may not be staying there. He may have gone outside with his parents or for education or for so many other reasons there could be. But it is through stories that he will still be able to stay connected to his roots. And likewise, he will also be able to know and learn about roots and cultures, about other people. And it is through stories that the older child will know about the values that unite people. And then we come to imagination, which we have already discussed. And then, of course, stories also act as an antidepressant. Some time back we were talking about reading stories, but now here we can also talk about telling stories because we are concerned with smaller children today. And whenever the child is sad, it generally works. When my kids were smaller, it generally worked. You just take the child's mind off that and put him through a beautiful story. Maybe show him something nice outside and make up your own story out of it. Or for the smaller children, this is a very nice story I often make up for kids who refuse to eat. It is the story of the ball, the porridge, and the tummy. So what happens is the ball says, "Hey porridge, I'm so lonely. Would you like to come and be my friend? Come sit here." So the porridge plops into the ball. They are friends. And then when they are outside, it is the tummy who feels lonely. The tummy says, "Oh my, I am so lonely. Hey porridge, can you come and say hello to me?" And this, you put in a very nice way so the child wouldn't even know when you have taken a spoon of the porridge and plopped it in his mouth and the tummy has friend. So this is how you do narrations in simple form for the child. And for older children, of course, we can encourage the child to make his or her own story about the same things. Maybe we can take the ball, the porridge, and the tummy and make him tell us the story, not us him. Let him tell us the story. And then, of course, it also instills confidence, because what happens when the child is talking, when the child is learning to talk and expressing itself better, it sees itself in a better social environment because it will learn to create friends, it will understand friends, and it will also learn to relate what others say. So there's a fine balance between communication from two sides. So this gives the child an edge in the social order, and he finds himself more secure with a greater group of friends, and this raises his confidence level. Then also, stories imbibe in the child a sense of curiosity. I read somewhere that when in 1944 the American physicist Isidore Isaac Rabi got his Nobel, he dedicated it to his mother. Because it seems those days in Brooklyn, when children came out of their schools, it was usual for the mothers to say, "Hey, did you learn something good today?" But Isidore Isaac Rabi's mother, it seems, would ask him, "Hey, did you ask a good question today?" So it was that asking of a good question, a different question, made all the difference. So it imbibes curiosity, stories imbibe curiosity. So maybe in the course of telling a story, you can just pause in between and ask the child a question or encourage the child to ask her question. Why did this happen? Why did it not happen this way? Or how could this character do this to that other character? So encourage this kind of an interaction. And then, of course, it develops rounded emotions. Now, emotional simulation is the foundation of empathy. And when a child has empathy in it, he knows. One moment, I think we have a message coming up. Okay, so quickly, when even this is happening, we can just say, is drama an important part of growing up years? And how to help change the behavior of a child without saying no or harsh words. This again I would put in the form of stories. That something happened, and when the ill-disciplined child was not listening or not letting himself or herself be disciplined, a disaster happened. So we can just end it saying, do we really want such a disaster to happen in our house? We don't want. So let's stop doing this. And believe me, I have 2 grown-up children. It works. It really works. And of course, yes, drama is a very important part of the growing up years because drama is all about body language. Yes. And then we also come to violent stories because all stories, sooner or later, the child will eventually come to it. All stories are not fairy tales with happy endings and all. There are difficult stories as well. There are harsh stories which create the demons in the child's mind. And what happens? To fight these demons, the child will become a bully in real life and try to harm and bully others who are inferior to it. This is a very specific part of our concern where we have to deal like just, I came to it, yeah, because the question also came up. We cannot have harsh words, but a kind of a firm tone is definitely required. Like I said first, I love you. That is wrong for I love you, but we can always say, Mama is hurt. And that goes a long way because for a child, Mama or Papa, these are the center of the child's world. Or you can say something, something which is very close to the child, his teddy bear, or maybe his cycle, anything. You can say, you did this today. Maybe the child in a fit of anger, in a tantrum, he kicked the cycle. So you can just tell him, see, the cycle is really hurt today. You can just on the slide turn the cycle upside down and say, see, it's lying there and crying. So these are the kind of stories you can tell, stories and tales you can tell the child to motivate it to come out of harsh behavior without harsh words. So then also when we're talking of harsh words and when we're talking of ill behavior, we just a minute, maybe one more question here. Okay, now. So we were just coming to morals in a story. Is it really important? It sure is. But how do you give the moral of a story to the child? There was a time when to know between good and bad, the child was pointed out both the good and the bad in a story. But what I personally feel is, let good and bad both flow together and take the child's attention to the good only. For instance, take a deep breath and hear what I say. Don't think of an apple right now. What are you doing? You're thinking of an apple right now? Okay, this is precisely it. So long you probably have never thought of an apple during the course of this session. But just the moment I said don't think of an apple, you started thinking of an apple. Likewise goes in storytelling. When we're telling a story to a child, we need not point out the bad. We can just put all focus, all attention on the good and praise the good, and in the course of the story tell and we say how good is honored and how good is rewarded. So the child will automatically not think of the bad as bad. It will think of bad as part of the story, part of the narration as it flows. However, eventually when the child grows bigger, it will definitely come in contact with good and bad. But then by that time, it will be mature enough not to indulge and head on dive into bad first. It will know that that is bad. I'm not to go into it. I will be rewarded and I will be praised and appreciated only if I do this. This part, the bad part, forget it. So this is the difference. We need not just point out that this is bad. Don't do it. Just keep it that way. We focus on the good. So this is about moral values. And then of course when we come to the subconscious is the dormant thought. The subconscious mind is the dormant thought, and the conscious mind is the active thought. Now, why are we discussing these two when stories are nowhere in between? Stories will come in between as the bridge. Stories will connect the two. Stories will bring up whatever is in the subconscious, whatever is in the dormant thought to the conscious mind, to the active thought. So what is there in the subconscious? Remember we were discussing about the five senses, how they help to build our subconscious. All of that way back in the early years of our life. All of it is imbibed in our subconscious. Now stories will dig into our subconscious and bring it out. This is exactly what will make the person we are in our adult years. So our foundation is way back there in our childhood, how stories we heard, stories that appealed to all the senses and the senses which help to develop our subconscious. All of these years they have worked on us. They have worked on us and made us the person we are. Now the fat B is what we did as our endeavor. Now on the child's part also, the child will have to process all of this input. So how does he or she do it? We will have to instill in the child the core skills. What are the core skills? They are the central skills, and again I use a mnemonic, the core skills, where C is for connect. It is connecting to the environment, to its surroundings, to whatever it's learning. And O is for observing. It will observe everything around, whatever it is connecting with. The trees, the people, the classrooms, the inanimate objects. It will observe everything and it will retain here in the mind, in the active thought, in the conscious mind. It will retain here, and whenever the need arises, it will express. So C for connect, O for observe, R for retain, and E for express, core skills. So from our side, we input fat B. The child processes it through the core skills, and what comes out is the impact. This is the entire, it kind of falls into a method, but never let a story fall into a method. But it kind of falls into a method when we try to raise a child in a happy environment. For a happy childhood makes a happy person, grown-up person. And I always love to say, in fact, in one of my books, this was the catch line. I wrote this book for Snehalia, House of Love, where we have underprivileged children and special children. So I always used to say every life is a blessing and every child a prayer. So keep saying that prayer. Your child is definitely going to be your blessing. So now I think we open the platform to some question answers or whatever you have to ask. I think we have some questions here. Which kind of stories to read out to a 2-year-old? Could you suggest something? There are very nice stories for 2-year-olds, which come from animal stories, because for a 2-year-old they are more into pictures and colors, so go for stories which have a lot of illustration, a lot of colors. I will not say any one author or any one writer or any one brand, but of course Ladybird books bring out beautiful storybooks for children. And whatever, when you go, and now of course you have the convenience, you have the luxury of sitting at home and browsing through books for your kids and for yourself. So just go through it, and whichever storybook has a lot of colors in it and shapes and pictures, go for it. And of course nowadays you also have books which have stickers in them, so you relate with one sticker, and then at the end of the book there's a kind of memory exercise, so you pick up those stickers from there and place it at the back of the book. And there are audiobooks as well. But I would suggest, please don't generalize. Whatever is good for child B may not be good for child A, because their tastes will be different, their requirements will be different. Like I told you, every child is extra special and extra precious. So go according to the child's requirements. And maybe for older book and maybe for older children, so you can go for books that start with descriptions, very good descriptions, so that will enhance the child's learning capacity. And later on, of course, from one point, of course, the child will start to show its own taste for books, the kind of books it wants to read. And sometimes the child will also show a liking towards writing its own books. Please encourage. Of course, the whole publishing process is a totally different one, for which we have different workshops and all coming up in other platforms. But if the child wishes and shows an inclination to write, please encourage. Please do. And now, of course, publishing is no problem on the online platforms. So go ahead, encourage your child. And yes, that's about it. So do we have any more questions? There is one more question here which says, can we tell our day-to-day experience or chorus into story to our child? Of course, and a definite yes to it. And I have been telling it right at the beginning of our session. Please narrate simple stories, simple tales. This is what happens when you express yourself and the child sees that, okay, this is how things can be told, can be narrated. It need not be just very methodical, take the plate from here to there. Make it sound very interesting, so that also the child enjoys the process of taking the plate from the kitchen to the dining table. It is not a chore for him. It is entertainment for him. It is fun. So, like we just had this question which asked, can we tell our day-to-day experience? Yes. Some time back, I just mentioned it, about the child in an online class and the friend's pet coming and sitting on the friend's lap. So likewise, we can also add up our day-to-day experiences and narrations. In fact, this book which I just showed you, the book that won me the award, is but a collection of stories, which is which a collection of stories that are based on life experiences. Of course, these have been slightly dramatized to keep the flow of the story going, but these are based on life experiences. And there are times when I was telling you about stories bridging between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. It also happens, it develops the protective reactions in a child. So you see, the child learns when to be alarmed, when to be alert, and when to just feel free and completely go happy and carefree. But there are times when the child has to know from instinct, from a gut feeling, that it is not the time to just be happy-go-lucky. It is the time to stay a bit alert and warned and take precautions. So these are the things that through stories, when the subconscious is developed, the child eventually gets to take care of himself or herself, and it has better judgment of its surroundings. When empathy is instilled in this child through stories, the child knows its surroundings and it comes to know people and judges whether the person is happy or sad, angry or playful. So accordingly, the child adjusts its reactions, because it knows if the child is to take that person as a friendly person, or it is to take that person as someone not to go too close to, which is, I think, very important these days. And then, of course, so yeah, and this is it. Uh, any questions? We have almost covered all the questions that have come over. And just in the meantime, since there are not too many questions coming up more now, maybe I can just tell you about um, how it instills a curiosity, stories. When I was small, there was this thing about Cinderella, and back here in Assam, um, in the entire Northeast. The Northeast is a storehouse of folk tales and folklore. So there would be a whole lot of stuff, animals who could talk, and people with wings and people with horns. And when we went to the villages, to the rural sites, people would tell us, actually, not in tales, people would say, don't go that side. The person, the beast with so and so wings and so thing stays there. So that was the time, we would like to ask questions. Is there something really like that? And digging on to it, I came to know that curiosity, that kind of the want to know more about things, have imbibed in people the curiosity for which a lot of documentations of the folk tales of the Northeast have started now. Earlier in the Northeast, folk tales and folklores were not documented. They were just passed down from, generation to generation, from grandparents to the younger children, and they would sit by the fire cozily and narrate these tales. But there was no written evidence. These stories all were undocumented. So what was happening in the course of time? All of these were changing, because it was like Chinese whisper, from one grand set of grandparents to the other. Somewhere in between, the story changed a little bit. So over time, the entire story got changed. Of course, certain part of the folk tales remained as it were, but these curiosity in children, someplace, sometime, started the process of documenting these folk tales. And today we are pretty much better off. Maybe someday we can tell you tales from the Northeast as well. So this is it. And Okay, I guess I have answered most of the questions. And so I don't know how much you have gathered, you have collected from this talk, but it was an enriching experience for me, absolutely and totally. But before I wind up, I would like to apologize once more because I know you all must have put your babies to sleep and sat down for the session, or you must have scheduled your chores and sat down. But we had some technical hitches due to which we really had no way out. So I really apologize and thank you so very much for being here and listening. And I hope I have given whatever I could. And I hope and I pray and I wish all my love and my luck to your little ones. May they grow happy, healthy, and may they have an all round development. And may they tell their own stories in good time. Thank you, team. FirstCry Intelli, and hope to see you again. Bye bye.